Jeffery Dhamer, the Milwaukee Cannibal. Today I'm going to be getting in exactly why Jeffery Dhamer was such a recipe for disaster. So that's coming up next. Hey everyone, I'm Brian Easterday and welcome back to Eye of the Storm Astrology. So today I'm going to be continuing my video series, The Astrology of Psychopathy, where I'm looking at the birth charts of serial killers and doing a psychological breakdown of them from an esoteric perspective of through Vedic astrology. But before, and today I'm going to be doing my video on Jeffery Dhamer and looking into why, this guy was such a recipe for disaster. But before I do that, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because I don't want you to miss out on any videos that could be helping you turn your challenges into strengths. So for Jeffery Dhamer, his birth time was kind of hard to find. From what I did find, and I believe this to be very, very close to correct because the ascendant Nakshatra works very well in this case, but I have his birth date being May 21st, 1960 at 8 p.m. in the evening. So this here will make Jeffery, and I'll go ahead and pull up his chart here. This makes Jeffery a Scorpio ascendant in the Nakshatra of Ardra Nakshatra. Now, first off, I find this very interesting and very fitting because, let me first kind of break down a general, for those of you who aren't familiar with Jeffery Dhamer, a general kind of breakdown of what he was guilty of. So he had murdered boys and young men, and then he would do various things. Like one of his things was that he would cuddle with the bodies afterwards. He would try to create living zombies. There was a few times he tried to create a living zombie because his whole thing was that he wanted that connection, but he wanted to be in control. And Jeffery was a homosexual man, and what he found was in that community, anytime he would get a partner, that partner would then want to take things farther, all the way where Jeffery was kind of wanting more cuddling and kissing and those type of, what he would refer to it as soft sex. That was the term he used for it. And when those partners wanted to go farther than that, that kind of frustrated him. So then he had the desire that he wanted to create partners that would then serve his needs the way he wanted to, where he could be in total control of them. And he tried to create these living zombies through doing different things like drilling through his victims' skulls and pouring in different things. He also cannibalized a few of his victims. He was found to have consumed some of them, so this is where he got the nickname the Milwaukee Cannibal. Jeffery wasn't the typical serial killer in the sense that he was doing it because he hated his victims, or where a lot of serial killers, they may say if they're picking up prostitutes or something like that, they will be killing them out of rage. They'll see them as scum, they'll discuss them that way, and they'll be very hate-filled towards their victims. Jeffery was different in the sense that it was a very misplaced or misconstrued sense of love and affection that he was wanting. And this is one thing why this Ardra Nakshatra for the ascendant works so well. Ardra is a nakshatra that is ruled by the deity Mitra, who is the god of friendship, love, those type of things. So Ardra Nakshatra is a nakshatra that's always dealing with partnerships, romances, but many times it deals with a forbidden type of love. Now, if we see here with Jeffery, not only was he a homosexual man, which at that time wasn't as quite as widely accepted, and definitely not by like his father, his parents, or anything like that. They were very much, his family was very Christian in that sense, so that was something, the father definitely would have looked down on. So it was forbidden that way, but he also, it was forbidden in the sense that he wanted to have these partners that he could control, that he could literally like keep their corpses and cuddle with them and eat them and do, keep the skulls and, do different types of things. Like one of the things he wanted to do was actually kind of create an altar, with all these different skulls and things on it. Now, Ardra Nakshatra does fall into the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio is a sign that is all about, it can deal with the darker side of life. It can deal with death and transformation, the occult, secrets, hidden things, passion, sexuality, taboo things, all a wide variety of things can be seen through the sign of Scorpio. And keep in mind the disclaimer, as I'm doing these chart breakdowns, just because you see one position or one nakshatra, if that happens to be in your chart or someone else's chart, that doesn't automatically mean they're a serial killer or something like that. That is a foolish way to practice astrology. Yeah, the chart has to be looked at holistically and see how the themes and the patterns are repeating, and that then makes it more likely those karmas, those things will come into manifestation in this person's life. But Scorpio can be a sign that deals with a lot of the darker side of things, and it being ruled by Mars, and his Mars is in like Pisces with his moon. So this can definitely make it to where he would maybe be more inclined to the more aggressive side of Scorpio, where a lot more of like that unpredictable passion and things could have came out. So, and I'll talk about more Mars here more in a minute. But with this Ardra Nakshatra, I definitely want to note there, this was a big part of his MO, is that he was all about, like I said, trying to create a connection, like with his victims, even if it was like keeping their dead corpses or consuming them or whatever it may be, trying to like reanimate them or make living zombies. It was because he was wanting a connection. It was because he was wanting a friendship. Was that being expressed in a healthy way? Definitely not. But again, he wasn't coming from this as like a hate-filled type of thing. He didn't, he said that in his, his statements in his trial, that, he wasn't about hatred or anything like that. It's that he was wanting that connection type of thing. Now, if we look at, the next thing that's interesting here is looking at his Mars, and Mars being in the sign of Uttara Bhadrapada. Now, those of you who watched my previous breakdown where I did on the Iceman, Richard Kuklinski, he also had the Uttara Bhadrapada Nakshatra. And this is one that I see it show up in a lot of serial killers' charts, and in a lot of them, to put it that way. It's probably one of the more prominent nakshatras that I see show up in the cases of serial killers. Now, it's also a nakshatra that has a lot of spirituality and things like that as well. So don't think this is just a evil or a bad nakshatra or something like that, because that's not the case at all. But it is a nakshatra that can deal with a lot of passion, almost having this two-faced or this dualistic quality to them, where they can definitely have different sides, kind of like a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of personality. And then with it being conjunct with his moon, and his moon is in the Revati Nakshatra. Now, this is really interesting because Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman, also had a conjunction with one planet being in Revati and the other being in Uttara Bhadrapada. So that is another interesting similarity I see here with these guys. Now, Mars being the ruling planet of both his first house as well as like his sixth house where his Venus is, and it having that duality to it, it shows that, like, yeah, he could be very two-sided, where he might seem very friendly and just wanting to pick up a guy to take him back and have drinks and have a regular time, but then he ends up becoming violent. he ends up killing them, murdering them, keeping their corpse, doing all sorts of very twisted things to it. So you can definitely see that moon in Revati. Again, Revati could be a very spiritual nakshatra. It's known as being a shepherd of souls. But one of the unhealthy ways that can pay out is being a shepherd of souls, where you are actually killing people. You're escorting them to the afterlife. That type of thing can be seen with that. And it's in his fifth house, which is the fifth house is like the house of romance and things like that. So you can definitely see a lot of this driving force, a lot of the reasons why he was the way he was and why he did the things he did and had some of the issues and things that he did, very much came down to this fifth house placement of this Moon-Mars conjunction in Pisces. It can make a person, like I said, very extremely passionate, to where their desire is just so deep, so overwhelming, they have trouble controlling them, and in this case, it being sexual desires, because it's in this fifth house of like sexuality, creativity, those type of things. Now, another interesting thing here is Venus, because his Venus is at like 29 degrees, so it's the Atmakarka of the chart, which means it's like the planet that had like the most, a lot of prominence in his chart. There was a lot of karmic lessons with this one for him, and it's in the sign of Aries, and it's in like his sixth house, which is the house of like debts, issues, sickness, problems, those type of things. It is combust because it's close to the sun, and it's in the Kritika Nakshatra. So there's a lot that we can see from this. One, Venus coming into the sixth house, it could show that like relationships, friendships, the way he connects with other people, that was a problem area for him. That definitely could have been an area that caused a lot of problems, especially that Venus is combust, so it's close to the sun, so it's being, the ego is something that can be kind of overshadowing the relationships or the quality of the relationships. And what did we see he do? His ego was so big that he said, I want to own these people. I want to control them. Even if it's coming from a place of I want connection with them, he's still narcissistically like murdering these people brutally and like doing whatever he wants with their corpses. So that can show that those relationships, those were overshadowed or outshined, I guess would be the better way to put it, by being that close to the sun. And Venus and Aries can make it to where like the way that he went towards interacting in a relationship, and it was in a more aggressive type of way. That when it, that came out, because again, this is being ruled by Mars, so it would have been two-sided. To where, yeah, he could have been aggressive or initiation, like he could have initiated talking to the boys. Like many times he would offer them money to come back and take pictures or, whatever it may be. But then whenever he would get there, the other side of the personality would come out. Now, this is in the Kritika Nakshatra, which is very interesting because Kritika could mean to cut. It's symbolized by an axe head or a knife. And, you can see this show up in surgeons or things like that. But people with this, what happens is Venus and Kritika, like, especially on the Aries side of it in the sixth house, is that, when he had a problem with relationships, what would he do? He would cut the people. He would literally cut up their bodies, like mutilate their bodies. Like, Kritika also has something to do with like a lot of like cooking, because it's ruled by the deity which rules it is Agni, which is fire. So then you have the associated with knives and fire. So you get many people who are chefs. Like if you want to be a good chef or something like that, Kritika Nakshatra is a great one to have. But when you get Venus in Aries and Kritika in the sixth house, well, yeah, he was a chef, but he was cooking people. He was a cannibal. Like he was eating his friends. His friends is, the people because that's what Venus associates, our friendships, our relationships, those type of things. Now, whether or not that's a healthy relationship doesn't matter. That's still Venus. So we could see that he was cutting up bodies. He was mutilating bodies. He was eating them. And this was a big problem for him. Obviously, like a lot of this had a huge effect on how his life played out, because he ended up getting sentenced, to life in prison, and then he was executed. You're not even executed, but he was murdered by another inmate just a few years later. I think he was incarcerated in like 91 or 92, and then he was murdered in 94. So, he wasn't in prison, but like a few years. And I could spend a lot of time on each of these, like looking at all the aspects and everything. There's so much to get into. This is such a fascinating subject because there's so much complexity to it, so much going on psychologically with the person, and each bit of the chart gives you a different insight. But I also want to look at his Navamsha, his D9 chart, just like I did with Richard, because even more interesting stuff shows up there. So I'll keep going here and try to keep this not overly long, even though it'll probably still at least be an hour-long video minimum. Now, the next thing I want to look at is his Sun and Mercury are conjunct. And his Sun is also in the Ardra Nakshatra, but on the Taurus side of it. And then Mercury is here, and Mercury is in Rohini. Now, Rohini is a nakshatra known for sexuality, creativity, beauty, those type of things. And Jeffrey said many times that when he was selecting his victim, because he killed, white males, Asians, blacks, he went out of his own race, which is not completely unusual for serial killers, but there's some, I can get off on a tangent on this one, but there's some reasons for that, why you would see them killing like more in their own race more often than not, just because those tend to be the people they're around. Like if there's a black serial killer, who's in the ghetto, well, he's going to have more access to African American people because that's who's around. Whereas if like a white guy from the suburbs was there, he would stick out like a sore thumb. Nobody would trust him. He wouldn't be able to get away with those crimes in that context. So it's that's very common that they'll kind of stay within their race many times, just for the fact that that's the victims they have accessibility to. That may not necessarily mean that they want to kill another victim of a different race if they didn't have the chance. But Jeffrey here, he wasn't specific to race or anything like that. What to him mattered, and he stated this many times, it was about how attractive the man was, how beautiful his body was to Jeffrey. And we can really see this here with a Mercury in Taurus, because Mercury is what's considered like a neutral planet, or a gender neutral planet. It's not neither male nor female. And it's in Taurus, which is like a sign of beauty and everything, and then in the Rohini Nakshatra, which deals with sexuality and creativity and beauty. So we can see here that he was attracted to men, but men that were like very effeminate men. They were gay men. They tend to be the more feminine man in the relationship. So he was attracted to men that had that kind of almost like gender neutral quality to them, where they had both like a lot of very masculine, like, they were men, but they were also very feminine, So you could see where he was very attracted to them, and he wanted them to be like the most beautiful ones possible. So that when he thought that they were very attractive, they were very beautiful, he wanted to then possess them and keep them and hold on to them, because Taurus is like an earth sign. So he wanted to, and it's all about pleasure and enjoyment and things. So he wanted to be able to own their body, to keep it, to be able to explore and to do the things that he wanted to do with the victim. Now, the next thing that's really interesting here is that he has a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction in Sagittarius in his second house of values, and both Saturn and Jupiter are retrograde. So this is quite an interesting one, because generally Saturn and Jupiter are considered enemies. They don't really get along very well. So normally, like, Saturn wouldn't be doing very well in Sagittarius, but anytime a planet sits with the ruler of that sign, it kind of will cancel out the debilitation. So you could see where the debilitation of Saturn technically would be getting canceled out here, but both of these are retrograde. Now, there's some debate on this in the astrology world on to how, like, if a planet is exalted or in its own sign, but if it's retrograde, it will actually act like a debilitated planet. It will act opposite. I don't necessarily prescribe to that all the way, but I do think in some cases there you could see a similar effect. And that's what I would see here with both Jupiter and Saturn being retrograde. I would see it kind of canceling out that positive effect that Jupiter would have on Saturn there, and it being not quite as healthy as like a combination as it could be, as say like those planets weren't retrograde. So when a planet goes retrograde, we feel like its qualities and everything a lot stronger. They become more intense. So when we see like Saturn here, and it's in his second house of values, he needs to control people. He wants to be dominant. He wants to like literally be able to have their dead body and then control, manipulate it, that type of thing. And Saturn also is a planet that symbolizes death, the ending of things. And it's in his second house of values. So what did he value? He valued being able to control people, to be able to end their life, and to be able to manipulate their corpses the way he wanted to. That was what he really valued. That's what he really enjoyed. And it came from it was a passionate thing. It was like a fiery thing that he couldn't stop. Now, Jupiter is in the Mulan Chakra, which is very interesting, and then Saturn is in Purvashada. So let me talk about both of these real quick. Now, Mulan Chakra is symbolized by like the entangled roots, but it's all about getting to the very bottom of things being destroyed, and that includes people who could potentially like destroy themselves. So what did, Jupiter's are morals or values, and it's in that second house of morals and values. So what did he value? Well, he valued death. He valued destruction. He valued, cutting off his victims' heads, cutting up their bodies, consuming them, that type of thing. And then Saturn being in Purvashada. Purvashada is a nakshatra that's all about going to battle, going after something that you want, like being willing to fight for something. It can be a very passionate nakshatra because it's ruled by the goddess Apis, the goddess of waters. So we can see here that, he felt a lot of emotional passion and draw towards death and destruction and the ending of things and controlling things and being dominating. All of those different types of things were very important to Jeffrey, and that's what he really valued. So that's why he chose to act on things the way he did. And I will note here that Saturn aspects into his fourth house of home, so that aspects into his heart, but as well as like his actual home. That's where he would bring men back to his home in order to commit his crimes there. So you can see a Saturn aspecting there. Saturn also aspects into the eighth house, so of death and transformation and destruction and hidden things, sexuality. So he had a strong sexual impulse to control his victims and those type of things. And it also aspected into like his 11th house of social network circle and things like that. And it's there in the sign of like Virgo, which is another earth sign, so about controlling and things like that. And so you can definitely see Saturn played a big role in putting that pressure on him to commit the crimes that he did, where he just felt this immense pressure, this passion that he had to act on it. After a while, he couldn't stop himself. Now, last little thing here that I want to see is in this chart at least, is looking at the north and south node of the moon, Rahu and Ketu. So Rahu being in the sign of Leo, and it is in the nakshatra of Uttara Palguni. Now, Rahu, when it comes into the 10th house, because the 10th house is known as like our fame, what we're known for, our house of career, those type of things. When Rahu comes in there, he can make you famous or he can make you infamous. In Dahmer's case, it was infamous. He became a serial killer. Like, that's what people knew him for. And it's in a sign of Leo. So it's, that's why he's one of the better known serial killers. Like, almost everybody knows who Jeffrey Dahmer was. And it's in the nakshatra of Uttara Palguni, which is all about relationships, bringing people together, romance, sexuality, creativity, those type of things. So you can really much see, what was he infamous? What was he famous for? He was famous for being an elusive, a trickster type of person who could change who he was, who his image was. So again, a Rahu and Leo type of thing. but he was known for his crimes being sexually motivated crimes. That's what he was known for. So you can definitely see that with Rahu and Leo and Uttara Palguni in the 10th house. At 100%, that's where that comes from. Then on the opposite side of this, we have Ketu in Aquarius, and it's in the 4th house. Well, and it's in the nakshatra Purva Bhadrapada, which comes, it's the nakshatra that goes before Uttara Bhadrapada, where his Mars is. But Purva Bhadrapada definitely has that, again, that association with two-faced. It's known as the two-faced. It's the nakshatra known as the two-faced man. So while Uttara Bhadrapada also has kind of that connotation, Purva Bhadrapada is where this really comes out. K2 being there is what we fall back on. It's what we're familiar with. And Aquarius is a sign that's all about like a social network circle and friendships. So what did he would go socialize with people, with other gay men, bring them back into his home where he had this two-faced nature to him. And then K2's there. What is K2? Well, K2 is this headless body. What did he do to many of his victims? He literally decapitated them. He would bring them into his home and he would decapitate them. So you can see that with a K2 in that position there. So again, the way you go and analyze a chart is when you look at different themes. The more those themes are repeated, the more prominent that's going to come out in that person's life, in their karmas. The more likely they're going to take action on those things. If you see dissonance in the chart where, like, you know, for example, this position saying this person might be very wealthy, this position over here saying they might not have a lot of wealth, well, those things are going to kind of like cancel each other. They're going to kind of like neutralize each other, right? Because they're conflicting things. There won't really be a big result one way or the other. But if you say you have this position over here says, oh, this person's got a good disposition for making wealth. Also over here it says that same thing, and over here it says that same thing. Well, then you're more likely to draw the conclusion this person's going to have the ability to create wealth. The same thing here. When we see similarities or patterns in behaviors of needing to control others, needing to dominate others, having these strong sexual urges that he can't control, needing to cut other people or to do those type of things, it's all these little pieces that when you add them together holistically, explain why Jeffrey Dahmer committed the type of crimes and atrocities that he did. It wasn't just one thing, it was a combination of all of them coming together. So that's definitely something that we can see here. So keep that in mind, that you always want to look at and study the chart holistically. And the reason why I made these slides are just kind of for an easy study guide. So those of you who aren't that familiar with Vedic astrology or how to read charts or anything like that, that's why I put a copy of the chart on the slide, as well as a list of like what planets are in what nakshatra. So it just gives you a quick research point that you could kind of go and look up these different positions further if this is something that's interesting you, and you can kind of have a jumping off point for your own research. And if this is something that's interesting you, please do me a favor and let me know in the comments below. Let me know your thoughts on this. Is this interesting? Do you find this fascinating? Would you like me to do more in-depth breakdowns, maybe a little bit shorter, quicker breakdowns? Let me know in the comments below what you guys are thinking about this. So the next thing I want to move on to is looking at his D9 chart. And again, as I explained in the video I did on Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman, the reason why we want to look at the D9 chart is the D9 chart is known as the fruit of the tree. It's also the chart of like our Dharma. And Dharma, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's like the essence of who we are. I've actually done a video on what is Dharma. If you haven't seen that, go back and check that out, and that'll let you know more fully what that is. But what we can see here is looking at this chart really shows us like the fruit of what we're going, you know, the results of what we're going to grow into as a person, like who we really are. So we can get a lot of insight from looking at this, especially in like the chart of serial killers. So first off, we have him being a Leo ascendant in the Navamsha chart. So that's very interesting, and it being in the nakshatra Purva Palguni, which much like Uttara Palguni, the Palgunis are a pair of nakshatras. They both deal with romance, with relationships. We're bringing people together, sexuality, creativity, those type of things. So again, this theme of a strong draw towards sexuality, that's kind of who he was. That's what he was known for. That's who he was as a person. Is there was this overwhelming sexual urges and desires there. And that kind of made up who his personality was. So I think that's interesting. Now, another thing I find very interesting here is that, well, let me look at something else real quick. Let's look at the sun, because the sun is the ruler of the first house. It's the dispositor. And the sun is sitting here conjunct with the moon. They're both in the sign of Pisces, and they're both, again, in the nakshatra of Uttara Bhadrapada, and they're sitting in the 8th house. So, I mean, when you start to put these together, it becomes so clear why he was doing what he was doing, because you get a sun and moon conjunction together. So his ego, who he is, and then his mind, his emotions, very much the essence of them, what they were really focusing on was this duality that comes in with Uttara Bhadrapada, this, because it's a nakshatra that's ruled by one of the Rudras. So it deals with destruction and death and those type of things. It can be a very dangerous nakshatra depending on what all is going on with it. But when we see the sun and the moon coming in here, both being in that same nakshatra, and again, this was a repeated nakshatra from his birth chart. So when you see these same nakshatras showing up again in the Navamsha, you know the qualities of the traits associated with that nakshatra were really an essential part of that person's personality. So when we see these in Uttara Bhadrapada, it has this duality to him. He has this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of thing going on. And again, it's in the 8th house. So it's in the house of death, transformation, the ending of life, that, that type of thing. And that's what he did, is that he, behind the scenes, he would end people's lives. That was what he was all about. Then the next thing, and this is a really interesting one, I think, is we see that he has a Saturn and Mars conjunction. And it's in the 4th house. And they are both in the sign of Scorpio, in the nakshatra of Anuruddha, which we talked about before, it being the nakshatra that his ascendant or his lagna is in his birth chart. So this was, again, like I mentioned before, the nakshatra that it's all about friendship, romance, because it's ruled by the god Mitra, who is all about joining people together, like I said, romance, sexuality, friendship, those type of things. So when we see Saturn and Mars coming here, again, Saturn being retrograde in the 4th house, what did he do? He would bring the people he'd bring in his home. That is where the control and the anger and the rage would come out, because it's Saturn and Mars together. So his anger, all that. So he wanted friendships. He wanted people. He wanted romance. He wanted to connect with people in this, because remember, Anuruddha Nakshatra can be this forbidden type of love. So he had this urge to have this forbidden type of romance, of friendship. And he would bring these people back in his house, but that's where the anger came out. That's where the control came out. That's where the domination and the murder and the ending of their life, violently cutting them up, eating their body. All of that type of stuff is a Saturn-Mars conjunction in Anuruddha for sure, in the 4th house. A Saturn and Scorpio in their Anuruddha Nakshatra in the 4th house. That's actually one that I've seen with other people. Even some other serial killers have that position. That I'll do some videos on them, but just other people I've encountered, that when you get Saturn in Scorpio in Anuruddha Nakshatra in the 4th house, so this can only happen if a person's a Leo ascendant as well. It can make it to where the person can definitely have some odd sexual fetishes, because you have Scorpio there, which has a lot of sexual energy. In general, especially, it could be darker type of things, like kink and bondism, and all that, more unusual type of sexual activity. And then Anuruddha Nakshatra is there, which is wanting friendships and romance and things. But then you bring Saturn, and Saturn being retrograde, it can make it to where a person becomes sexually attracted to the things associated with Saturn. So that could be domination, bondage, controlling. It could make a person a sexual sadist. And again, just because a person has their Saturn and Scorpio in Anuruddha, it doesn't necessarily, but when you specifically get it with a person who's a Leo ascendant, and then it comes into their 4th house, this is something I've definitely seen. A person can have some sexual sadism. They can be attracted to other things that like Saturn deals with. So like I said, like bondage, domination, control. Saturn also deals with like excretion, like waste, like whenever you eat your food, you get all the nutrients out of it and then your body gets rid of the rest that it doesn't want. That's Saturn. That's what Saturn does. It like recycles things. It gets rid of things. It takes the waste out of things. So you can see maybe a person would even have like a fetish towards, that type of thing, the people who are into dealing with excrement or other things like that, that could be seen with something like that. Or just even being Saturn deals with death. So being sexually attracted or sexually stimulated from death, or feeling that, like in Jeffrey's case, the way he connected or he had friendship or a romantic relationship with the person, he would connect with them through death. Is only actually once they died that he felt like he could actually have that friendship or that connection or that bond that he wanted. It was only after he killed them. And you could definitely see that with Saturn and Mars being there conjunct in Ardra Nakshatra. And this is one I could really look a lot into this placement here, because Saturn aspects into his sixth house of problems to, the seventh house of fame. It also aspects into the 10 places from itself. So that would go into his first house. So his sense of self. So you can really see that it, again, not only in the birth chart, but in the Navamsha chart, Saturn played a huge role in why Jeffrey Dahmer did the things that he did. And then Mars here aspects into the seventh house of relationships, the 10th house, the 11th house of social net. So, again, it's repeated themes that we're seeing here, that he has this type of quality, and it plays into all these different similar areas of life, all these different similar houses that deal with the same kind of stuff, like friendships, what we're known for, our social network circles, all these different things. These planets are all bringing their influence there. So it brings that darkness, that darker influence into all these different areas of his life, to where it just became so much of who he was that he couldn't stop himself from doing it. We also have Mercury here being again in the Kritika Nakshatra. So again, that Kritika Nakshatra showing up again, the cutting, the slicing, the needing to control people, and then once they're controlled, being able to cut them up, consume them, that type of thing that Kritika Nakshatra can deal with in the context of a person like this. That's kind of how it will play out. Now, the last couple things I want to look at is he has a Rahu and Venus conjunction in his fifth house in Sagittarius, in the Rahu's in Mula and Venus is in Purvashada. So again, the nakshatras of Mula and Purvashada showing up again like they did in his birth chart. Now, Rahu being in Mula Nakshatra, well, Mula is all about, again, death, destruction, those type of things. It's the nakshatra, but the Rudrani is associated with Alakshmi, Niriti, Mahakali, all those very strong feminine goddesses that are like destroyer goddesses. They're the female parts of Rudra, the Rudrani. That's associated with Mula Nakshatra. So Rahu's our desire. So what do? He had a desire. It was like a destructive feminine desire. Because what was he doing? He was wanting to connect. He was wanting to have relationships. There was an emotional need. There was a feminine need. It wasn't like a masculine need of, I just need to go out and rape and kill as many people as I can, that type of external expression that a serial killer can have. This was really motivated. His desire was motivated by an internal, a feminine need of wanting to connect with people. There was definitely an emotional side to it. But what was it? It was an emotional need, or a draw of desire towards destruction. It was very chaotic. It was very emotional based. It wasn't a logical based thing. It was all about connecting through like the feminine energy, through the feelings, through that sense of connection and friendship and love, or however Jeffrey may have seen it, or felt it himself. And then Venus being in that Purvashada, well, what's that going to do? It's going to create relationships, especially because it's in the fifth house of romance, relationships that when he has those destructive desires, what's he going to do? He's going to act on them. He's going to fight with the people that he's romantically involved with, that he's going to be willing to take action to fight them in order to fulfill whatever type of destructive desire it is that he had, sexually. And then that's exchanging aspects with Jupiter and Ketu, which are in the sign of Gemini in his 11th house, and they are in the Ardra Nakshatra. Now, Ardra Nakshatra is, again, it's another one of the Rudra Nakshatra. So we've seen he, in either his birth chart, there's 4 nakshatras associated with Rudra, and for those of you who don't know, Rudra is like Shiva, but Rudra is the destroyer, the destructive energy in the universe. So there's the Rudras, which Ardra, which is Rudra's actual nakshatra. Then directly across from it is Mulan Chakra. That's Rudrani, or that's his spouse's nakshatra, the feminine side of Rudra. And then there's Purva Bhadrapada and Uttara Bhadrapada, which are also associated with ruled by one of the Rudranis, one of the Nagas, who's a Rudra. So we can see that all of those showed up. So a lot of destructive energy was in this guy's chart. It was a huge part of his personality, is that need for destruction. And destruction isn't always a bad thing. You have to learn how to use it, though. Like I'm a person, my Jupiter happens to be in Ardra Nakshatra and my Venus happens to be in Mulan Nakshatra. So I have both of those nakshatras in my birth chart, and I definitely have had to learn how to control my anger over the years, figure out how to use like destructive qualities, or the need to want to tear things apart in a good way. So for example, like with Venus and Mula, like how I do is one of the things I'll do is, like, for those of you who may have been familiar with some of my work previously, like in the Wizard Factory, I spent a lot of time like breaking apart and looking at like Christianity and monotheism, the Abrahamic religions, and just ripping them apart and destroying them because they're fucking bullshit. We'll say that. Yeah, I won't get too much into that here because it's going to get off topic. But when I see something like that I see as like harmful to a person or is tearing them down, it makes me want to destroy that. And Mula Nakshatra specifically it's all about going to the root. So finding like the lies that are contradicting each other and using this lie to destroy this lie, because both of these things can't be true. That's what Mula is really all about. So I've learned how to use that in like a healthy way. But that it's a very difficult thing for people that have not just one of these nakshatras, but multiple of these destructive nakshatras, that it can become very overwhelming and very hard for them to control those type of urges and things. And that was definitely what we saw in Jeffrey's case. Now, with Jupiter coming into Ardra Nakshatra, it can make it to where that sense of destruction can make him feel like he's expanding, because Jupiter expands things. It's our wealth, it's our abundance. So it made him feel like he was gaining something because it's in his 11th house of gains. So for him, he felt like an expansion, a gain of connection, of friendship whenever he was destroying. As weird as that may seem, is that he felt like he could really connect with the people, have the friendship after he destroyed them, after he killed their life or he cut up their body and he just had their corpse there. That's when he felt like he could actually have that friendship. And you can see that there, as well as it being with Ketu. Ketu being that headless corpse. So we can definitely see there that is what he fell back on. And then this is in his social network circle. So what did he gain? Or what were the gains he was going after? Well, in the social network circle, he was wanting to have friendships, but friendships with people that he was killing. And then that gave him, that expanded how he felt. That gave him a sense of that he was getting something from that destructive process. So you can definitely see that coming into play there as well. So a lot to look at here. Again, guys, I'm just barely scratching the surface. There's other charts. I haven't done any analysis of like any of the yogas in his chart. I barely touched on aspects. There's all sorts of different things that we could see here to keep getting more and more insight. But these were just some of like the top things that I saw. I just wanted to kind of do a brief review of the birth chart and the Navamsha chart to give you guys a general idea of like how we can see in Jeffrey's chart. There were so many different little repeated patterns and variables that it really ended up being a recipe for disaster. That's why he would have really had a hard time being anything other than what he was. You know, and it's sad to say, but that was part of his karma. That was part of his experience in that incarnation, was that he was going to commit atrocities and things like that. And there are a lot of ways where he could have taken that chart and turned it and used it in a very positive way and become a successful person that was a healthy, functioning member of society. But again, we saw so many repeated variables here that we could see that of like why that was just so difficult for him and why he ended up succumbing into all the urges that he had and actually acting upon those things. And he ended up killing a lot of young men because of that. So that's going to wrap this up, guys. I hope you found it valuable. If you did, again, like, share the video around. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this. I definitely am interested into hearing your guys' insight at that, as well as if there's any other specific serial killers or just charts in general that you would like me to you would like to see me do a breakdown of. Let me know those in the comments as well. Be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. That way you don't miss out on any videos that could be helping you turn your challenges into strengths. And if you guys need to get a hold of me to contact me for consultations, courses, or for whatever it may be, you can click the link below in the description. That goes to my link tree, and that is a one-stop shop for my website, social media services, whatever it may be. It'll get you where you need to go. Thank you for tuning in, guys. I always appreciate the support. And remember, by creating more awareness, we create more opportunity to be the best versions of ourselves. I'll see you guys next time.